Right. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. Welcome. We're excited to get started here, and I'm just going to wait for a few more people. We've got almost 100 people now. A few more registered. We'll give it a couple of minutes, and then we'll get started.
Hello. Line पे
Okay, so I think we've got everyone here now for the webinar, and okay. So looks like we've got everyone here. We'll go ahead and get started, and yeah, we're going to kick off our summer webinar series, beginning with urban forest master plans. We're doing that with Josh Lahowick from Davey Tree in the States. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks, welcome. I hope everyone's doing well. Can you hear me fine, Kenton?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, well, I'm excited to get this webinar series kicked off here with you all. It's going to be a great series, and I'm excited about this topic. Just want to make sure everybody knows that before we get started, we got a couple little housekeeping things here. Everything is being recorded, so if you have to leave early or you want to forward this on to a friend, feel free to do that. Everyone will get a link at the end. We are going to be using the questions and chat feature, so definitely going to be taking questions, and we'll give plenty of time for that at the end as the goal. If we can't get to everybody's questions, then we will respond to you after the webinar, individually. So maybe to go ahead and make sure you're comfortable with that, if you could go ahead and type into the chat feature where you're calling in from. It's kind of interesting to see where everybody calls in from. We are going to be doing some interactive polling. Helps us better understand who's out there since we can't see you. Helps us to engage and learn more about you. You will be getting a follow-up survey as well that will help us make these better for you. We have uploaded 4 handouts for you guys, so you can download those whenever you want. We're going to be referencing them throughout the presentation. One of the handouts is a PDF of the presentation, so feel free to get a copy of that if you want. If you have any issues with those, we can get those to you individually as well. And you will get an email certification of completion after this, along with the recording, which can be used to help with any continuing education units you might want to have. So again, I'm excited to be here and looking forward to chatting with everybody today. So, all right, Kenton, I think we're ready to get started talking about urban forest master plans.
Great, thank you, Josh. Okay, so if we could just go to the next slide there, Josh, that'd be good. And I just wanted to briefly explain why we're doing a series of webinars together. So essentially, our urban forests are, they're often an overlooked and undervalued resource, and this is at a time really when, a a lot of places having climate emergencies, and this is really coming to the fore. And our urban trees and urban forests really are in the front, our frontline defence against climate change. And yet we're losing urban trees at an alarming rate. So statistics from the USDA show they're losing 36 million trees every single year, there, urban trees. And just to put that into some context for us here in the UK, there's only 8 million trees in the whole of London's urban forest. And this is at a time when many of you will be aware that more of us are moving into towns and cities. So currently, it's around 54% of the global population live in urban areas, and that's projected to rise to 70% by 2050. And in fact, in the UK at least, it's well over that already. Around 80% of us are living in urban areas. So despite this and the importance of trees, 67% of urban forests in the UK have no proactive management, really, which is a bit of a shock. And that their findings from the Trees in Towns 2 study, and that's quite old now. That was released in 2005, but not much has changed in that. And on top of that, DEFRA, the Department for Food and Rural Affairs, will soon be announcing the recommendation for all local authorities to have an evidence-based tree management plan. And so that's mainly why we devised this series of webinars with Davey, who in the US have been doing urban forest master plans for quite a long time. Next slide, please, Josh. So we're going to have 4 webinars. Coming up for you. So there'll be one in 3 weeks on tree planting strategies, helping you to achieve canopy goals, but also looking at what to plant and where to plant. The third one is going to be looking more at iTree, which is a peer-reviewed open source program, which is a really good tool for assessing urban forests. And Josh will talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then finally, the one at the end of the series, we'll be looking at trees, people, technology, and communities. You know, they're the biggest stakeholders of the urban forest, and collaborations, because obviously by collaborating we can achieve more with less. Next slide, please, Josh. So we're going to now look at today's agenda in a bit more detail, and this is stuff that Josh will be covering. And we're going to be looking at what is an urban forest master plan and how we use that for adaptive ongoing management with the criteria and indicators. What do we want and how are we going to do that? So essentially, an urban forest master plan is a roadmap. It provides detailed information, recommendations, and gives an idea on the resources that are going to be required to effectively and proactively manage and grow a city's tree canopy. And more importantly than that, it provides a shared vision for the future of urban forests to inspire and engage stakeholders in the care and the protection of trees. I think there's 2 important points here with this slide. Is we're looking at the city's tree canopy. It's not just the public trees, it's the public and the private trees across the whole landscape. And the other thing is, it's looking at the tree canopy, we're not just talking about the numbers of trees or the population of trees. It really is about that canopy cover, because that's the driving force behind tree benefits. Next slide, please, Josh. So something I often get asked when I start broaching the subject of urban forest master plans is people come back and say, well, we've already got a tree strategy. Isn't that the same thing? Well, not always in my mind. And whilst many tree strategies, they do a great job of focusing on the publicly owned street trees and how local authorities manage trees and get the policies around trees set up. An urban forest master plan is aimed more at the landscape scale and is often greater in scope and time horizon. So in the US, the term and concept of the urban forest has been around for a little bit longer, and there are many urban foresters there as a job role, whereas over here we tend to have more tree officers. So there's more of that landscape scale approach. And I think we've got our first poll question coming up now, actually. And so we just wanted to ask you folks, do you have a tree strategy? So if you could just answer that, and we'll see and collate the results and give you some feedback on that and then move forward.
All right, vote early, vote often. We leave this open for a couple more seconds here. So yeah, I think if you're calling in from the UK, tree strategy. If you're calling in from the US or somewhere else, you might call it a tree management plan. All right, looks like about half have voted, so we'll go ahead and close it out here. And it looks like about, it's pretty interesting, Kenton, about half have one within the last 5 years and half don't have one at all. So
yeah, that's it. That's not far off that 67% ratio for tree management in the opening slide there. So yeah, just looking at the differences then, the main differences between a tree strategy and a master plan was one's looking at the public trees. A master plan is much more holistic. Tree strategy tends to involve the city staff and look at those public trees and park trees, whereas a master plan has got a much broader stakeholder engagement. Tree strategies can often be wish lists as well, whereas a master plan is more of a shared vision. And master plans take longer to come to fruition. Obviously, there's a much longer period of feedback and consultation. Although I think with UK tree strategies, they can take a bit longer than 4 to 6 weeks. And of course the costs as well. Next slide, please, Josh, because although we haven't really got master plans in the UK, I think there are a lot of really good resources out there for getting to grips and creating them. So this is the Trees Design Action Group Trees in the Townscape Guide, which has been out for some time now, and we've got that as a handout, which is available through the GoToWebinar program. So you should see that appear and you can download this. But it's a great template actually for an urban forest master plan. And you can see that actually item 2 within these 12 principles for urban trees is to have a tree strategy. So a tree strategy is just part of this bigger picture in managing the urban forest. So that takes us to our next poll question, I think, Josh, which is, yeah, does anyone out there actually have a master plan? Because I've not come across them named as such. I think there's some that come pretty close, but it'd be good to open this poll and see what the feedback is.
All right, so we have it open right now. People are figuring them out. They're going in quicker, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out here in a couple seconds. All right, Kenton, it looks like about 20% have one have some version of a master plan going, and then the rest either don't know or don't have one. So looks like should be able to help some people out, learn more about them today.
Yeah, I think it's curious that yeah, it's good that more people are in the process of doing one. That's really encouraging. And I think I'll hand over to you, Josh, now to tell us a bit more about urban forest master plans.
Great. Yeah, so I'm going to take you kind of through the process here of how urban forest master plans have been kind of created in the States, but I think a lot of this can apply internationally. So, and I always like to kind of open up here that we're going to use an adaptive management process, looking at what do we have, what do you want, how are you going to get there. And then one of the key differences, I think, between a master plan and a tree strategy or a tree management plan is really this feedback loop of how are we doing. It's meant to be an interactive, long-term vision to allow for change. Now, each one of these processes in the adaptive management could easily be an hour plus long presentation. So keep in mind, we're going to keep this pretty broad here, and we're not going to touch on everything. But the big thing here that I think you want to try to think about too is, what are your criteria and indicators? Trying to have as much as possible an objective, process for evaluating. One that we like to use a lot, but I think you could use any, there's a number of them out there, is the criteria, the Kenny et al. Criteria and indicators for sustainable urban forest planning and management. And the reason we like this is it has three real subjects categories we look at, which are the trees, the kind of the community or the people, and then the management of the resource. And then, you look at the different indicators there, and we always customize this for every client or community based off of what is important to them. So you could add stuff for climate change, you could add items for invasive species management, add different sorts of initiatives that you want to independently judge yourself on. But the important thing is to have a process and then be consistent with your process, because when you're working through your process, if you don't know what you have, and you're not able to evaluate it, then how can you effectively manage? And like to think about a stocked room. I think Amazon is probably the best at this. You can get anything you want wherever you're at, and it's real about inventory control. So if you know what you have, and you can know where you're going to go and what you want to do. And that as a resource manager, that's critical. And I like to think about an urban forest program as being on some sort of continuum. So thinking about what are the milestones for your program and what are you trying to actually accomplish with that. And this is meant to be like a customizable, adaptive approach that you can create your own milestones on. So example is in the States, we might use Tree City USA. In in the UK, you might use Tree Council as kind of that initial part. You might add or need to edit your milestones, but I think having a clear path forward helps you build your program, and you can integrate the items that are important to you, and you could have a tree strategy as part of your continuum, or a master plan as part of your continuum. And it could be its own milestone, or it could be part of a milestone, or it could come, really early on in the process or later on in the process. But again, the thing that I like to illustrate here again is that feedback cycle where you have, a way in place to actually, update. So I'm curious, which milestone you're actually kind of working on, or which one is your next goal for you? And I'm seeing some good questions come in, so go ahead and keep those coming. All right, leave this poll open for just a couple more seconds. Interesting. It looks like things are pretty split down the middle here with working on tree inventories, tree strategies, master plan, funding. It's really awesome to see that staffing isn't a priority for everybody. That's kind of a new one, I think. Usually that's a common issue, is understaffed and expected to do more. All right, so let's dive into a little bit more to the actual master plans here. You know, the concept is to have a vision, right? And to know where you're going, and to, you know, a master plan kind of comes in at maybe a 20 or a 30,000 foot view. It's not, you know, ground based. It's not a daily action plan of what you're going to do on a day-to-day operation. It's more of a long-term goal into it, is where your master plan is. And if you can get everybody on that same coordinated vision, then it can really benefit your community. It can benefit your departments. It can really benefit your program at whole. And there's lots of good examples around the world. You know, here is a really good example of one of the Mercy Forest Plan locally. So I encourage everyone to kind of check that out when you have a minute. So, all right, so now I'm gonna transition into the what do we have section here. And, you know, again, keeping in mind the adaptive management process here, what do we have, you know, what do we want, and how are we going to get there? So the what do you have really is about kind of the state of the urban forest. So when you start a master plan, we always want to start with, you know, just better understanding what the urban forest looks like. And, you know, part of doing a master plan sometimes will be going out and actually doing additional field work, or collecting existing GIS information and kind of compiling it all together. And one of the best tools available, you know, that's consistent internationally, is the iTree suite of tools. That can help you really collect data, both in the field, but also when you get that data, you can analyze it, and you can better understand the structure and the function of the urban forest out there. And the thing I like about the iTree tools is you can really get down to the species level of them, and you can really understand. Again, this is a functional slide, so we can see how much the trees are providing back to us and how much of which species we actually rely on. I think we can all agree that species diversity is a really critical indicator for the health of our urban forest, as we continue to see global pests moved around, and we're battling things like climate change. So understanding which of the trees out there provide the values that you're relying on as a community. iTree also allows you to take that and look at it from a bigger picture and understand what the canopy of your trees are providing. And when you combine that with different sorts of GIS layers, you can look at all sorts of interesting analysis based off of census data, or based off of water quality, or based off of you know, the density of your canopy, environmental justice issues. So you can really kind of look and see which parts of your community are providing the benefits as well. So that's the beauty of using the iTree suite, is you can get the individual species level, but you can also get up to the canopy level and start layering your data. So when we start looking at, you know, what do we have, this is the first phase of our master plan is trying to bring as much existing information together in one place and putting a critical thinking lens into it so that we're asking the right questions and we're, again, thinking through that criteria and indicators that we laid out at the beginning. And we're starting to better understand how is our urban forest currently functioning for us. And usually we look at it at a low, medium, or high functionality. And we're thinking which ones of these is low quality, which ones are high quality. And then we're able to take a deeper dive later into the master plan when we're looking for our solutions. So we thought it'd be good to share a local UK example of gathering information. So I'm going to turn it over here now to Kenton, who will talk about the Islington project that Treeconomics did. And I'm sorry, Kenton, there seems to be a decent delay in the slides, so I'm going to do my best here to advance for you.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So, yeah, in Islington, they've not yet started to write an urban forest master plan, but this was a good example of gathering the information. Just to rattle through quickly, you know, there's the tree canopy cover information that you can get from satellite data or iTree Canopy. Then iTree Eco was used on their public, on their tree inventory, on their existing council inventory. But also then you can start to look at the recreational grounds and also the policies as well, a policy review, looking at the hooks where trees can link to policies from the very highest level, the Sustainable Development Goals, because, you know, trees feed into quite a few of those. They help meet those goals, and that's really good for the tree officer to be able to understand where he can find the hooks for trees and where trees can help to meet targets that are set by other people higher up, be that the emissions or air quality. You know, trees can contribute to all these things. Next slide, please, Josh. And so we collated all that information, and one of the good things that you can do now online and with GIS is share that information with the communities and with the stakeholders of the urban forest, so people can actually see what their urban forest is doing. And this is very similar to Josh's earlier example from the Tallahassee. So we put all that online, and people can look at the different ecosystem services on a ward by ward basis. Next slide, please, Josh, because they can also look at the tree conditions in the neighborhood, and you can zoom in and zoom out of this map, and then you can start to plan and find the best places to grow your tree canopy based on social deprivation, population, and where are the best places to plant trees. So within that GIS environment, you can layer all those things together, because you don't want to plant trees underneath existing tree canopy, etc. And this is a great example from a recently completed project that we were part of as well, which was great to be part of that. City of Trees in Manchester, who completed a similar exercise, but they've also just released their tree and woodland strategy, and we've added that as a link as well, so you can check that out. So I'm going to hand back over to Josh now, because I know time is of the essence, to take us through the next steps of the Urban Forest Master Plan, which is about what do we want. Over to you, Josh.
Great, thanks, Kenton. Yeah, I think that Islington is a great example of bringing together a lot of, you got 4 different projects there, and you're kind of bringing them together into that nice web-based format, and people love maps. In today's society, we have to be able to access everything from our fingertips. So having a mobile version helps a lot. And our communities, they're real engaged right now, and they want to be heard, and they want to see, and they want to know. So I was working on a master plan in my old hometown, and I asked the client, I said, why are you doing this? You don't need to do this. You have a good a really good program, you know, you have really good support. And he just said, Josh, it's really simple. If a homeowner calls me and asks about a tree or asks about our goals, if I don't have a plan and I don't have something I can show them and tell them what we're doing, then they're going to tell me what to do. You know, we're a town of 115,000 people. That's 115,000 bosses. If I have a master plan that I can point to and I can show them and just tell them, they may not like it or they may not accept it, but they won't tell me what to do anymore. And I can tell them what we're doing. So, you know, with that in mind, one of the things that makes urban forest master plans, you know, pretty unique is this concept of community engagement and getting your stakeholders involved. And, you know, it's about all sorts of processes there. So I'm curious how you guys, you know, kind of do goal setting. How does your community set your goals? That is, hopefully you have goals. All right, we'll leave this open for a minute, but you know, I think the concept is important here.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's around a quarter to 30% don't have goals. That's dropping now, but
yeah, I think Kenton, they're the ones that know right away. Yeah, we don't have anything. It's easy to answer.
yeah.
All right, well, go ahead and close this out here. But yeah, interestingly enough, so that's you know, pretty good. It looks like about half do it internally in some sort of process. You know, I think the key there is that's great if you're doing that. Hopefully, you're communicating those goals out to your community so they understand it. You know, and then you know, pretty evenly split the other 50% between don't have them and a panic response to political issues. So you know, this is kind of that example of being told what to do. And I would imagine the none and the panic response are tied together, right? Not mutually exclusive. If you don't have a goal set or a master plan set, then everybody can tell you what to do. And again, it kind of goes back to my example of my old client and an old friend of why they were doing one. So when you're setting goals, you know, it's important to think about why you want to set your goals. And, you know, again, this is where the master plan is really nice because it helps with that shared vision. And a good example is Tree Cities of the World, but there's lots of other programs out there that are rolled out. And, you know, you can garner support and interest if you have a goal like that. So when you're engaging your stakeholders, it's important to share some information. If you just go out to them and ask, hey, what do you want? Or what do you think we're doing? Or how do you think we're doing? And you don't share anything, it's pretty open-ended and it's hard for them to provide real feedback. So it's our experience is giving a little bit and then asking direct questions about it really helps engage the process. The other point here is you need to put it in their terms. You know, so we've mentioned things like iTree earlier. And if we talk about what do you think the structure of your urban forest looks like? That's very jargony and it's hard to understand that. But if we ask them, you know, what's important to you? Is improving the air quality important to you? You know, that's a way that we can ask it in that's a very approachable and people can talk about it. And then they'll think about what their urban forest is doing for them. So what we like to do when we're engaging our stakeholders is, again, back to our criteria and indicators that I shared at the beginning. We're thinking about the trees, we're thinking about the community, and we're thinking about the management of it. So we ask the same type of questions about each one of those criteria. And then, you know, that helps us think about how each one is performing individually. And then we take these results from our community and, you know, we better understand what the perception is of how everything is performing out there for us. And, you know, what that does is, you know, helps us set our goals. I think it's real important. I always like to say at this time that it's real important that when you're engaging your community, you need to understand, you know, why are you engaging them? Sometimes it's a process where you have to, it's legislated that you have to provide community and the community feedback, and the community as internally, you know that you're not going to do anything with it. It's just part of the process. So, that's the amount of effort you're going to put into it. Then that's probably the amount of effort you're going to get out of it, and that's fine, But if you're truly interested in getting your community engaged, and you're truly interested in their responses and their input, then I think you need to think about the approach of how you get that engagement, and think also about what you're going to do with the results, because you'd be pretty surprised with the results that you get, and it can be pretty exciting as well, particularly on the ground level and the grassroots level, for understanding the adoption of it and what people are going to actually do with your action-oriented results. So that's an example of how you can use a master plan to help you understand and engage communities. So now, I mentioned the how are we doing is one of the critical differences between a master plan and a tree strategy. One of the things we're not going into now here is some of those recommendations. Once you set goals, master plans usually have, anywhere from 10, 12, 15 actual action-oriented strategies. And I would love to share those with you, but we just don't have time for that. But that is what happens, is you take your goals and you clearly say how you're going to do it. So assuming that's already happened, part of the master plan is that feedback loop. And how are we doing? So I thought I would share an example in Charlotte, North Carolina, an example of the master plan that we did there. And I think Nadine is going to post up a link to this for you in the chat bar, so you can actually link out to it and see it. But, Charlotte did a master plan, and they have a canopy goal that was set by council of 50% by 2050. I think that's a pretty common scenario that people see out there, is someone sets a goal based off of a canopy goal based off of kind of just a fun number to say, right? But through Charlotte's Stay of the Urban Forest assessment, they realized, all right, we currently have 47% canopy. So they only got to make it 3% in the next 25 years. How are we going to do that? What's that going to look like? But actually, when you start looking at the canopy, you realize that there's a couple of key headwinds for them that they need to be thinking about. And that's their aging community, but it's also a rapidly developing community, a rapidly developing city. So, they have a 50% canopy goal. Currently, it's 40%. That seems pretty doable. Let's see how we're doing. What are we looking at? So we did a couple different models, estimating, based off of how they're currently operating. So we looked at a couple scenarios, and what we decided to do was look at, here's an example of how their aging canopy is doing. So in 2 neighborhoods, they looked at the current number of street trees, and based off of projected removals of those street trees, how many are there going to be in 2050? And you can see here that they basically have about a 30% removal of trees. And then you can see what the future change is going to be on that. So not only is it a loss of canopy, which is against their canopy goals, it's also a loss of environmental benefits. They do have a 1-to-1 tree replacement program. So when they remove one, they add one. But we all know that big trees will provide the benefits. So by understanding that their 1-to-1 replacement strategy, along with their removal strategy because of an aging canopy, now they're able to project out what the future results are going to be of that, and understand, what their issue is with trying to make that canopy goal. So, they have the canopy goal set. Now they're trying to determine how they're doing towards that canopy goal. The next model we looked at was the impacts of development. So very rapidly, very business-friendly community. They have a pretty strong, what they thought is of a pretty strong tree ordinance or tree bylaw in place to preserve canopy and replant canopy. So here's an example of one project, and we're using the iTree forecast tool built into iTree Eco. We measure out the unique canopy of this development and during the development, pre-development, you can read a 68%. After development was immediately completed, they dropped down to 11%. And then they had to plant 350 trees. That seems like a lot of trees, right? Well, interesting enough, that because they're all small, that only brought it back up 1%. And then when you project the growth of that, it gets pretty, embarrassing to think that it's only going to grow 1 more percent, that the overall canopy by the time it's to 2046 is only going to be 13%. But now we at least know what we're working with. So we looked at taking that concept of that development, and the slide the graph on the left shows what's currently happening, and then the one on the right shows if they had planted a couple additional trees. So if they modified their policies to add more trees to the plantings, what that would look like. And you can see that even then, it still doesn't get you to what you want, but it gets you better. Another way to think about how are we doing is to look at a historical perspective. So here in Tallahassee, we went back in time and looked at the tree canopy cover that existed back in 1954, and then compared that to 1983 and then 2015. So by using Google Earth and some other historical aerial imagery, we're able to do that. And we can see that, in Tallahassee, they were actually trending up really well with their canopy for the first 30 years, doing really well. And then kind of, it's a direct relationship between building and road and impervious surfaces. It really started to decline again with the kind of the development of it. This project is particularly interesting because we originally went into it, and the major region we wanted to look at the canopy change was actually from hurricanes. Tallahassee is in Florida here in the States, and it gets hit pretty routinely with hurricanes, and they lose a lot of canopy to hurricanes. But interestingly enough, the hurricane loss was marginal compared to the development loss. So now we're actually engaged with them and doing a very similar project that we did to Charlotte with looking at their development code. So that's where the master plan, by diving in and taking a deeper look, helped us understand, okay, they have a canopy goal. How are we going to get there? And that's where I like to think about this Mike Tyson quote, everybody's got a plan, right? Everyone's got a plan. Everybody thinks they know what they're going to do. It might be in your head. It might be written down somewhere. It might be, online. But then, what happens when you get punched in the face? I mean, it's probably too soon to say it, but we're all kind of getting punched in the face right now with COVID, right? Like, how are we responding to that? What are we doing about that scenario there? And, it's interesting to see a lot of people taking, their master plans and reworking them in this COVID era, or getting punched in the face right now. And that could be, climate change, that could be funding issues, that could be any number of issues that are going to punch you in the face. And how are you going to respond to that is the key thing that I think differentiates strong managers and strong community forests versus weak ones. And I like to think of this master plan as your central, like that's your foundation. And all these, bubbles around your master plan on the right are basically punches, right? They all kind of going to get punched at you at all different times. And your master plan is something you can tie back into that and help you respond to that. And, you can adapt it and look forward to tackling some of these issues with your plan. Right now we're taking this opportunity to rethink our community engagement strategies. Traditionally, that's been built on the model of set up a public meeting, have a bunch of people get together, put up sticky notes, and we get the same, cast of characters there every time. Well, now we're looking at, like, this is promoting us to use, things like social media more, to meet the people where they're at, so we're looking at going to food banks and food lines, meeting community members where they're at, and then asking them for, their input into the community forest. And that's a real exciting opportunity for us, because had COVID not happened, I don't know that we would, have been so creative or been forced into, playing our hands in this. And it's, while it's a traumatic issue that we're all dealing with, more people are relying on our urban forests more than ever. Our urban forest is being deemed essential. People are connecting with nature in a way. I've seen so many interesting articles on people writing chalk on the sidewalk to label their trees for their neighbors, to tree walks, closing down streets and promoting walking around your neighborhood and looking at your trees and your flowering trees, creating tree maps. There's a lot of opportunities that your master plan and your nature can do that. One thing I always like to do is bring it back to our ecosystem services. I think street trees used to be viewed as ornaments along the streets, as something nice you put up there. Now we definitely understand that they're an asset. We definitely understand that they're producing things for us. We can't live without them. So anytime we can promote those and be, stretching ourselves to think more about what that function is, then that's a good thing. And that's what we want to do, is try to bring back our urban forest, bring our nature, bring our solutions back to our ecosystem services. So again, kind of wrapping it back into this urban forest continuum, and get ready with your questions. We got some good ones that have come in here. We'll be wrapping up here in a couple minutes, so go ahead and start typing those questions in. But bringing it back to where are you at on your urban forest program continuum? Like we saw that pretty evenly split. People are working towards tree inventories. They're working towards master plans. They're working towards their tree strategies. Seems like everybody on this call has enough people, so that's awesome. That's usually a limiting factor. I would challenge you to think about becoming a tree city of the world. I know UK, I think Kenton has 6 now. This is a great program that is free and you can take advantage of and leverage, and get your elected officials, get your department heads, get your communities supporting and around it. It's sponsored by the Arbor Day Foundation, amongst other partners. But that's the master plans in a nutshell. Is how adaptive management strategies is what do we have, how are we doing, what do we want, how are we going to get there. So I appreciate everybody's time and attention here, and we'll answer some questions in a second, but Kenton's going to tell you guys about our next series, some items.
Yeah, and thank you, Josh. That was good. It was just, I'll do this quickly because I want to get on. There are some really good questions actually that have come in. So yeah, the next one's on tree planting strategies, 18th of June, and that's really going to be myself and Keith Saker from Bartram Trees talking about the what to plant, where to plant, and how to plant. So hopefully you can make it to that one as well. And in November, there's the 3rd European iTree Conference, which is being held in Amsterdam, and we're hoping that we'll have Cecil Koynendijk, who some of you may well have heard of, doing the keynote there on urban forests in general, but also David Nowak from the US iTree team as well, giving a presentation on iTree and where that's at and the future developments, which are looking quite exciting. So we can hope you can join us for that one as well. But I think we should get on to the questions now, because there's been quite a few. Josh, do you want to start with these, or I've got a couple that I've been looking at whilst you've been talking, actually.
Yeah, go for it, Kenton.
Okay, so we had a good question from Ian in the Midlands in the UK. Is an urban forest master plan a roadmap or a destination? So
I think it's kind of both. A lot of times in your master plan, you'll set out a roadmap, and your destination, your vision statement is what you look for. And that's a pretty broad vision statement. And it's not that much different from maybe the business sense of, setting a mission and a vision. But, usually in a master plan, you're going to have pretty detailed strategies to accomplish your goals, which will definitely serve as a roadmap. So it'll help you to accomplish those goals along the way.
Nice. Thank you. I've got another question here then from Helen, and that's around how can local authorities afford to develop an urban forest master plan when budgets are so tight? And I wondered if you had any examples from the States of other funding streams or ways of funding, because they're not cheap, an urban forest master plan.
Yeah, you're right, they're not cheap. And in the States, we have a couple models that help us a lot here. One is we work with nonprofits or NGOs, non-government agencies, to help. They tend to not only help with fundraising, but also they help with the community engagement part, because the general public, tend to trust a nonprofit or a non-government agency more. So that helps a lot of times, as well as, they have different foundation support and different fundraising abilities that cities don't. So that's one. The other way, I was just talking to a gentleman up in Detroit yesterday, actually, that interestingly enough, he had funding from the National Health Institute. So looking at alternate places, I think a lot of times we go straight to the same piggy bank for our urban forest funding. One model that's working well in the States here is a lot of, as a movement to get our programs, our urban forest programs, into stormwater departments, thinking of trees as a big piece of the green infrastructure and part of the stormwater management. And that funding source becomes much more stable and much harder to rob from whenever you have particular issues that pop up. So I think partners is a good way to help with it. I think looking at where your money is coming from and how you can make that more stable to build off of. There's models for getting into stormwater assessments. There's models for there's things called like tree banks where developers have to pay into it for a recompense fund for removing of trees. Getting these type of mechanisms in place can help create a larger piggy bank. And then the last thing I'd answer it with is, you don't have to tackle it all at once. You can do it in a phased approach. Maybe start with a tree inventory, maybe start with just a community engagement process. You can do it in a phased approach that it doesn't have to all be at one time. It's nice if you do it at one time, but you can do it over phases.
Yeah, thanks. I would echo that actually. In the UK, we had a slide on it earlier with the Manchester Tree and Woodland Strategy, and I know City of Trees, an NGO, and they were able to pull that together and the funding, and they worked across 11 local authorities, I think there are in Manchester, that to do that combined strategy. And I know it was one of the textbooks I read or I was told at a conference was, one of the first things you should try and do as a tree officer or urban forester is get on board with a tree NGO and use them as a tool to help your own efforts. But it's still not easy, I don't, getting this stuff together.
Right.
I've got another question from Steve, and he was asking, how can you get support from other departments in a council or a municipality, e.g. the highways department or the housing department?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that I think internationally everybody struggles with. When you're looking at doing a master plan, that's why it's different than like a tree strategy, or it's different than a tree management plan, because you're thinking about the whole forest. So a lot, you're incorporating that private land, and in order to get that private land, you're going to really need, most times, the department that's most interested in doing it is going to have to go over into another department, because there's very few departments in a city that cover the whole area. One way that we've been very successful in doing that is by engaging, a lot of cities have like a sustainability department, or somebody that, it's a pretty small department. It could be, or it could be a planning department. By engaging them, they kind of have their fingers in all the other departments. and they're able to help us find the right person in each department that will help be, help us to promote it internally. And they also usually have the direct ear of council and the mayor, or however you're set up, because again, since they're charged with maybe making the community more sustainable, or they're charged with planning the development of the community, they have a direct report up to the council. So that's the best piece of advice I can say is find that department that does have a far outreach into and works with all the other departments, and get them on board. And usually they're on board because these are right in their wheelhouse. This is what they want to do. They want to look at the whole urban forest vision, just like they might think about the vision for the streets or for internet or access issues. So that's what the quickest answer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Thanks, Josh. I've got so there's a lot of questions actually, which is really good, but I might not be able to get through them. We might not be able to get through them all, but there's another one here around the funding again, which is always an issue. And this is from Amy. Has anyone taken the value of the ecosystem services, etc., and then tried using them as credits, selling them as credits to corporations to offset carbon, and paying the funds back into investment in the urban forest? So I know there's a couple of examples that were trying to be set up, and they are cited in that Trees and Design Action Group, Trees in the Townscape document that you've got as a handout. There's an example from I think it was Birmingham, did some green bonds. But have you got any examples from the stateside, Josh?
That's a growing thing here, and there are a couple communities. The best example we have is actually the state of California. They have a cap and trade system in place where corporations have to pay taxes for the amount of carbon they use, and then they offset it with grants and programs to communities to plant trees and manage trees. And that's a really good system. And I think annually it turns into about, for just urban forests, it goes to a lot of different elements. But for just urban forests, it turns out to about $35 million a year in annual funding that goes back into communities. So that's the best initiative. But there is a company, Greg McPherson, or is it Mark McPherson? Anyway, with city carbon credits, that is trying to do just that. And if you're interested in that, I encourage you to reach out to him. He can help you. I know he's got a couple communities on board, and that's the concept that you're exactly describing, is how corporations that want to do good can offset their carbon footprint by getting cities to plant trees and to preserve trees for carbon. So, and he has a system in place to value them and help determine what is needed and the value of it. So again, that's city carbon credits with McPherson.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think there's many examples in the UK, but I know there's people out there that will tell me I'm wrong, and that's great if they can share that with us. Any up and running payment for ecosystem service schemes. I know they've been talked about a lot, but I'm not sure if any have made it out of sort of the pilot phase. Another question now from Margaret, which is, what's the most aggressive, impressive urban forest master plan you've seen, Josh?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Aggressive, impressive. I uploaded the one I like that seems to be kind of the bar that most communities set, is I actually did upload the Pittsburgh master plan, which was one of the very first ones that really kind of led the way in a master plan. And what they did that I would encourage communities to think about doing, and I've never seen anybody else do it, but they actually started their process by doing a feedback survey to other people that had tried to do master plans to learn what worked and what didn't work. And they took that feedback of about a dozen cities that had different iterations of master plans and brought it to their steering committee, and they said, okay, here's what didn't work for these communities, here's what did work, and here's what we think we want to do. And that's kind of, it's coming up on 10 years, which is crazy to think about because I remember working on that one, and I guess I'm getting old. But anyway, that really set the bar for master plans. And I think since then, several communities have surpassed that bar. But it routinely is one that people reference to me. I'm surprised. I know they've shared it on 6 continents, and they've spoken around the world on it. And it continues to be one that is brought back up time and time again as maybe the benchmark to start with. So maybe I'll flip that and say, I don't know the most aggressive one out there. That's hard to think about. I'll think about it more. But kind of the benchmark that a lot of people go to is the Pittsburgh one. I don't know, Kenton, what you think.
Well, actually, I was lucky enough to go and meet the guys who were involved in Tree Pittsburgh. And I think it's a great initiative. I was really impressed by the fact that it goes beyond the master plan, and you can see they've implemented it. And they've got, the NGO is actually managing the city trees as well, or assisting actually with, pruning the trees, which would be unheard of here in the UK. So here in the UK, I think that the one that I liked is that Mersey Forest plan, because it's quite old now actually, but it kind of ticked all the boxes of an urban forest master plan without being called an urban forest master plan, and that is available as a handout there in the sidebar. I wanted to make a quick comment which has come in from Ian in the Midlands about the Global Tree Cities of the World network. So over here in the UK, if you're thinking about that, the organisation to go to is Trees for Cities, who are working with Tree Cities of the World, and they can help you if you're thinking of applying. And the second thing I'd say is you don't have to be a city. So out of the 6 currently in the UK, 2 of those, I think, maybe 3 are London boroughs. So don't be off-put by the fact it's Tree Cities of the World. Okay.
Yeah, good point, Ken. And I don't know about you, but I'm fine to stick around for a little bit longer, but we can also wrap up. I know we're over time, and I know a lot of people are asking about CEUs, and we did not get this pre-approved for continuing education units for ISA, but you will get a certificate for attending, and you can submit that along with your certification number, and it'll get approved. There's no doubt that it'll get approved for one CEU. All right.
Yeah, we can answer a couple more questions, and then I don't think we're going to have time to answer them all, but we will do that after the webinar's closed out via email.
Yeah, it looks like Lance Davison up in Boise, Idaho, provided Mark McPherson's city credits link there. I'm not sure if everybody can see that or not. Yeah. Ken, do you want to pick out maybe 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's someone here. Ross has made a comment that would it be worthwhile looking at organisations to fund these environmentally positive projects as they've received funding for a project from a local power company for the same purpose?
Yeah, again, that's a great idea, and I think that's where that ecosystem services can really tie in. If you can go to your local power company and talk about how trees can help with energy reduction and emissions offsets. Here in the States, the utility providers and our power companies are really good partners in our urban forest. They understand that they don't want people planting the wrong tree underneath their power lines, which is going to cause outages, which is going to cause all sorts of maintenance problems. So if they can be proactive and positively engage, and then they are always looking for good public relations, good PR. So local power companies is great, and if you can tie back your iTree results to that, you can demonstrate what's in it for them. Not only the PR part, but the energy conservation part can be really, really beneficial. I mentioned the same with like health. I mentioned the Detroit. The reason they got involved is they're looking at pollen and understanding where the highest concentrations of pollen are for asthma, as that's a big driver for health-related issues, and understanding when those trees are going to produce the pollen and where their concentrations are so they can map pollen. Well, when they need to do that, they need to understand where all the trees are. They need to have a better description of what trees are where. So that initiative can easily tie into, you can take that data. And I saw a comment here. I'll answer this next question about how do you find trees to get places to plant trees. Well, when you do a urban tree canopy analysis, like what Kenton showed for Islington, and you're looking at tree planting strategies, part of that process is finding available places. And then you can overlay different GIS and different, criteria to prioritize those planting places. So it could be based off of stormwater, it could be based off of environmental justice issues, it could be based off of canopy goal setting or size of the trees. But I think that's what Kenton and Keith are going to talk about in the next webinar, is those tree planting strategies. Whether it's your utility provider or health department, they all should be interested.
Yeah, that's a nice sort of link into the next conversation, the next webinar actually, and it's we're already sort of 10 minutes over, and I don't know, shall we wrap up here, Josh? Thank everyone for attending and for your time, and we'll get back to you via email or using the chat function on some of these questions if we haven't had time today to go through them. But it was really good to get all that feedback and all those questions.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been so fun to see people calling in from Brazil and India and the States and England and Canada. I mean, it's just so exciting to think about this global initiatives, these global, passion for urban forests. It's I know Kenton drives Kenton and I to think of innovative solutions to try to help make the next master plan even better than the last master plan. So it's just such an exciting time, and I'm excited. And I think Kenton, we learned a lot here today. That the next one, we need to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. But we'll be able to reply to these questions and follow up emails to everybody. And thanks for all the good comments there. And it's fun to see lots of friends from join. So again, thanks everybody, and I hope you have a great day out there.